What if the most beloved symbol of the holidays was once declared an enemy of the state? It's hard to picture, right? But for millions of people, putting up a festive tree, glittering with lights and ornaments, wasn't a symbol of joy. It was a criminal act. This is the forgotten story of how a cherished tradition was banned for decades, forcing an entire nation to give up its customs. It's a story of ideology, rebellion, and the surprising birth of a brand new holiday that rose from the ashes of the old one. We think of the Christmas tree as a universal sign of peace and celebration. But for a huge part of the 20th century, in a country covering 1/6 of the globe, putting up a fir tree in your home could cost you your job, your freedom, or even your life. This isn't ancient history. This is the bizarre and true story of the Soviet Union's war on Christmas, and how it accidentally created one of the world's most unique and lasting New Year's traditions. The German tree in a Russian winter. Before it was a criminal, the Christmas tree, or yolka in Russian, was a celebrated import. Its journey into Russia actually started way before the revolution, thanks to the modernizing Tsar, Peter the Great. Back in 1699, as part of his big push to align Russia with the West, he ordered that the New Year be celebrated on January 1st, and that streets should be decorated with pine and juniper branches. But this was mostly a public thing, not something people did in their homes. The idea of bringing a whole decorated tree inside, that really took off thanks to royalty. In the 19th century, it was Tsar Nicholas I's German-born wife, Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna, who made the custom popular. She brought the festive tradition of her Prussian homeland to the Russian court, setting up a pine tree in the palace for Christmas. What started as a royal quirk soon became all the rage with the Russian aristocracy. By the late 1800s, the yolka was the magnificent centerpiece of Christmas for Russia's elite, with lavishly decorated trees standing tall in the homes of the wealthy. It was a time of huge celebrations, gift-giving, and the rise of a uniquely Russian fairy tale figure, Ded Moroz, or Grandfather Frost. He wasn't just a Santa Claus copy. Ded Moroz was a powerful frost demon from old Slavic myths who had been softened over time into a kind, gift-giving winter wizard, usually with his granddaughter, the Snow Maiden, or Snegorochka. For a while, this mix of German tradition and Russian folklore was thriving, but the first dark cloud appeared over the yolka, not with communism, but with World War I. In 1916, with Russia in a brutal war with Germany, the Christmas tree was suddenly looked at with suspicion. In a wave of patriotism, the Orthodox Church publicly condemned the tradition, calling it an unpatriotic German custom. This was the first time the beloved tree was outlawed, a spooky foreshadowing of the much harsher ban that was coming. When the Bolsheviks took power in 1917, they found this anti-tree sentiment to be a very handy tool. The axe falls. The Soviet War on Christmas. After the 1917 October Revolution, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks set out to build a new world, a workers' paradise, free from the old ways. A huge part of this was state atheism. Religion was called the opiate of the masses, a tool the rich used to control the poor. So naturally, all religious holidays were put on the chopping block. Christmas, with its deep spiritual meaning and fancy traditions, was public enemy number one. At first, the Bolsheviks seemed on the fence. They even briefly encouraged New Year's parties for kids. Lenin himself famously showed up at a children's party in 1919, charming the kids and handing out nuts, but that didn't last. As the 1920s went on, the anti-religious campaign kicked into high gear. Propaganda posters started calling the Christmas tree a bourgeois and savage custom. It was branded a priestly custom and a symbol of the very class enemies the revolution was trying to crush. They even brought up its German origins again to link it to Russia's old enemy. The League of Militant Atheists led the charge, getting school children to campaign against Christmas. They organised festivals to mock religious holidays and made up new, red holidays to take their place. The attack was relentless. But the final nail in the coffin came in 1929. Under Joseph Stalin, the government issued a formal decree that changed everything. Christmas and even the non-religious New Year's Day were declared official working days. The 7-day week was also abolished for a continuous 6-day work week, a move designed for industrial efficiency that also conveniently shattered the rhythm of religious holidays. Suddenly, the simple act of putting up a tree was a crime. Cutting, selling, or decorating a yolka was strictly forbidden. Volunteer patrols and activists were told to spy on their neighbours, peering into windows to find any sign of a secret celebration. If you were caught celebrating Christmas, you didn't just risk getting shamed, you could lose your job or even be arrested. The gift-bringer Dead Moros was outlawed too, condemned as an ally of the priest and the kulak, the wealthy peasants who were being persecuted by the state. For 6 long years, from 1929 to 1935, Christmas in Russia was driven deep underground. The festive lights went out all across the Soviet Union. The ghost of Christmas passed, life under the ban. Just imagine the silence of a late December night during those years. The streets, which should have been buzzing with festive markets selling pine trees, were dark and empty. The air, which should have smelled like evergreens, just carried the biting winter wind and whispers of fear. For 6 years, this was the reality for millions of Soviet citizens. The joy of the season was totally replaced by anxiety. Celebrations didn't disappear completely, but they became quiet acts of defiance, hidden in secrecy. Families who clung to the old ways had to become conspirators in their own homes. A tiny tree, maybe just a single branch, might be hidden in a back room, far from the prying eyes of neighbours or those dreaded volunteer patrols. Curtains were drawn tight to hide any flicker of candlelight. Kids were told to be quiet, their natural excitement smothered by warnings not to mention the secret tree at school, because one innocent comment could lead to disaster. Soviet writer Irina Tokmakova remembered that feeling. The glorious holiday of Christmas was banned, and those who dared to celebrate it could pay with their job or even their freedom. People decorated their hidden trees with whatever they could find: painted eggshells, scraps of coloured paper, shiny candy wrappers. These weren't grand displays, but humble, homemade symbols of a memory they refused to let die. Meanwhile, the state tried to fill the void with godless evenings and Komsomol Christmas, events filled with anti-religious lectures and political plays. But these hollow ideological gatherings couldn't replace the warmth and magic of a family gathered around a tree. Living under the ban meant living a double life. Publicly, you were a loyal Soviet citizen, working on December 25th. Privately, you might be risking everything for a piece of a forbidden tradition. The yolka was more than just a tree. It was a symbol of a past the state was trying to bury forever. It's hard to wrap your head around a world where such a simple joy was a criminal act. This hidden history shows just how powerful symbols can be. If you're finding this story as fascinating as we do, take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We dig up forgotten histories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The surprising thaw. Stalin's 1935 reversal. For 6 long, quiet years, the Christmas tree was an outlaw. And then, in a move that absolutely stunned the nation, everything changed. The reversal didn't come from a popular protest, but from the very top of the Communist Party, and it was published in the state's biggest newspaper, Pravda. On December 28, 1935, a letter appeared from Pavel Postishev, a high-ranking party official and a known ally of Stalin. The letter was a direct and shocking call to action. He asked, why do our schools, orphanages, nurseries, children's clubs and young pioneer palaces deprive children of the working class of the Soviet state of this wonderful enjoyment? He argued that before the revolution, only rich kids got to enjoy a festive tree. Now that socialism was being built, he declared, it was time to end this wrongful condemnation of the tree and organize a good Soviet New Year's tree in all our cities and rural villages. This was no random act. An article like this could never have run in Pravda without Stalin's direct approval. In fact, Nikita Khrushchev later wrote in his memoirs that Stalin had personally told Postishev to float the idea. So why the sudden change of heart? It definitely wasn't about religious tolerance. It was a cold, calculated political move. The mid-1930s were a brutal time. The country was still recovering from a horrific famine caused by Stalin's policies, which had killed millions. People were exhausted and demoralized. Stalin needed a way to project an image of happiness and stability. He had just famously declared, "Life has become better, comrades. Life has become more joyous." What better way to prove it than by bringing back a beloved celebration, just as long as it was stripped of all its religious meaning? It was a masterstroke of political theatre, a moment of joy to distract from the terror and hardship of the Great Purge, which was just getting started. From Christmas tree to New Year's. Yolka, the great secular makeover. The return of the tree was immediate and total, but it wasn't the same tree that had been banned. The Yolka was brought back to life not as a Christmas tree, but as the Novogodnyaya Yolka, the New Year's tree. It was a complete and brilliant rebranding that twisted every part of the tradition to serve the new Soviet reality. First, the tree itself. The star that once topped the tree, symbolizing the Star of Bethlehem, was replaced by a bright five-pointed red star, the symbol of the Bolshevik Revolution and the Red Army. The tree was no longer a tribute to a religious story, but a monument to the state. The decorations got a makeover too. Factories were ordered to mass-produce New Year's ornaments, but instead of angels, you got symbols of communist progress. The branches of the Soviet Yolka were soon covered with glass figurines of Marx, Lenin, and even Stalin. There were ornaments shaped like factory smokestacks, biplanes, and bundled-up polar explorers, celebrating Soviet industry and achievement. Later, during the space race, you could find cosmonauts, rockets, and Sputnik satellites, turning the tree into a showcase of Soviet ambition. Even Ded Moroz was brought back from exile and given a Soviet identity. He returned not on Christmas, but on New Year's Eve, delivering gifts to good Soviet children. He still had his long coat and flowing white beard, but he was now completely secular. He and his granddaughter Snegurochka became the wholesome, state-approved faces of the new year. Sometimes Ded Moroz would even quiz kids on communist ideas before handing over their presents. The celebration became a massive, state-sponsored event. New Year's parties, or yolki, were mandatory in every school and kindergarten. The biggest one of all was the Kremlin Yolka in Moscow, and getting an invitation was a huge honour. In a grimly ironic twist, Pavel Postishev, the man whose letter brought the tree back, was arrested and executed during Stalin's purges just 2 years later. The man who saved the Yolka was consumed by the very regime he served. Legacy of the Soviet New Year. The Soviet Union is long gone, but the tradition it created is alive and well. The New Year's holiday, or Novi God, became the most important and beloved holiday on the Soviet calendar, and its legacy still dominates the festive season in Russia and many post-Soviet countries. The secular rebranding was so successful that it totally replaced Christmas as the main winter celebration. For generations of people who grew up in the USSR, the tree, the gifts, and the big family feast were all about December 31st. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Christmas came back as a public holiday, celebrated by the Orthodox Church on January 7th. But while many people observe it, it's a much quieter, more religious affair. The main event, the big, joyous party with presents under a glittering tree, is still firmly on New Year's Eve. Today, Ded Moroz and Snegurochka are still the main gift bringers. Ded Moroz even has an official home in the Russian town of Veliki Ustyug. The story of the Soviet New Year's tree is a wild example of cultural resilience. The state tried to kill a tradition, but found it couldn't stamp out the human need for celebration and wonder, especially in the middle of a dark winter. They couldn't kill the tradition, so they captured it, stripped it of its old meaning, and gave it a new one. So the next time you see a festive tree twinkling with lights, remember its secret history. Remember that for a while, in a huge part of the world, this symbol of peace was an illegal object. Its story is a journey from royal palaces to secret back rooms, from an enemy of the state to a tool of state propaganda. The Christmas tree survived in Russia by dying and being reborn as something totally new. It's a powerful reminder that traditions don't always disappear under pressure. Sometimes they just find a new reason to celebrate. The Soviet yolka is more than just a holiday decoration. It's a monument to political survival, cultural resilience, and the unstoppable human desire for a little bit of light in the darkness. What other secret histories of holidays do you know? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for digging into this piece of forgotten history with us. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the weird and wonderful corners of the past. We'll see you next time.